Good morning, afternoon, and evening, dearly beloved people of the internet. Today, we're going to hop onto one of the heaviest subjects of the 21st century, 9/11. We have been focusing on motive, means, and opportunity. This is the second of three parts, means. Oh, I didn't introduce ourselves. This is Boyce Brown with Mark French, bringing you ahead of the curve, where we are more intelligent than Smartline and have less sexual assault than Charlie Rose. But we're going to be talking today about 9/11 means, but we're going to weave in a lot of motive too, because especially the Israeli and Zionist elements that participated, the motive and means were inextricably bound for ways in which we will shortly discover. So 9/11 was the biggest false flag of the 21st century. So it behooves us to take a look at some of the other ones that have come our way. And certainly one of the ones that started America as an overseas empire was the USS Maine. Newspaper magnate Hearst said to famous artist Remington in Havana in 1897, "Please remain. You furnish the pictures and I'll furnish the war."
Mm-hmm.
And look at those little specks, i.e. human bodies, go flying in the explosion. And then another false flag that we should attend to is the RMS Lusitania, and that was blown up on May 7th, 1915, brought America into World War I on the side of the British. Here you see side by side the advertisement for the Lusitania sailing and the warning from the German embassy, "Don't do that or we will shoot people on the flag of enemy."
Mm-hmm.
And FDR may have known about the Japanese fleet steaming towards Pearl Harbor. And here's one that comes with absolutely with receipts. Operation Northwoods. There is the cover sheet. There is the chairman, Lyman Limitzer, who later went on to be the supreme commander of NATO, proving NATO's capacity for psychological warfare, bullshit, and duplicity goes way, way back. And we could read a little bit from the actual plan itself, because it bears a lot of similarities with what happened in 9/11.
Absolutely.
Reading from the second complete paragraph, it says, an aircraft at Elgin Air Force Base in Florida, factors into 9/11 too, would be painted and numbered as an exact duplicate for a civil registered aircraft belonging to a CIA proprietary organization in the Miami area. At a designated time, the duplicate would be substituted for the actual civil aircraft and would be loaded with the selected passengers, all boarded under carefully prepared aliases. The actual registered aircraft would be converted to a drone. Then they talk about rendezvousing them and then blowing one up by a radio signal. In so many ways, it's remarkably similar to the elements in 9/11 that we'll see. And of course, more recently, we have the Gulf of Tonkin incident, in which it was alleged that the North Vietnamese were shooting at American naval vessels. It didn't happen, but it ramped up American involvement in Vietnam. And now more Vietnam veterans have died from suicide than died from combat. And everyone knows about Nixon's recordings, but LBJ had his Oval Office wired for sound as well. And he said something to the effect of, "For all I know, our Navy was out there shooting at whales." So who does all this shit? Mark French?
CIA.
Even deeper than that.
Yeah.
The deep state. Who is the deep state? Let us have a gander. I propose it as an actual empirical model of power, operating at the confluence of government, intelligence, narco-trafficking, organized crime, high finance, oil and resource extraction, covert operations, paramilitaries, terrorism, and aviation. Now, the phrase deep state originated from political analysis of Turkey. In the Anglophone countries, it was popularized by the work of Peter Dale Scott. And in the Trump years, it came into more common parlance to refer to the permanent civil service, especially in the intelligence, national security, State Department, and military, that were there before any particular president came and would be there after any particular president came.
Sure.
But I think that's a misnomer, because I think the true deep state has a lot of elements that are not in the formal government employ.
Of course.
They can be, and they can use the government, but they can also use other social forces as well. And another common means is to have them be in intelligence, but then sheep dip them into a corporate role or what have you.
The rotating positions happen very frequently.
Yeah, exactly. So that's a brief survey of American false flags and how we define the deep state. Now I need to get right into a history of Israeli terrorism. And here's a snappy motto: by means of deception, you shall make war. It's a motto of Mossad. So let's take the briefest of all possible journeys down Israeli terrorism lane. And we can start where most of these surveys do, with the King David Hotel bombing. This took place in Jerusalem on July 22nd, 1946. And the primary motivation was to destroy any documents that may have incriminated the Jewish agency in attacks on the British that were attained during one of their the British Operation Agatha, a series of raids by the Mandate authorities. So this bombing killed 92 people, 17 of them Jews, and injured 46. It was organized by the leader of Irgun, Menachem Begin, who would later go on to be prime minister. And the Jewish agency chairman and the first prime minister of Israel, David Ben-Gurion, declared Irgun to be the enemy of the Jewish people. And Albert Einstein compared Irgun and its successor political party, Herut, with Nazi and fascist parties, and called them, quote, terrorist right-wing chauvinist organizations. So clearly Einstein was a self-hating Jew. And then the other one that comes up most frequently right away in these types of surveys is the Lavon affair, named after the defense minister at the time in the summer of 54. And its objective was to mobilize sleeper cells of Egyptian Jews that they already had in operation and to plant explosives in British and American educational and cultural institutions, libraries, cinemas, educational centers. And they were going to blame these attacks on the Muslim Brotherhood and the Egyptian Communist Party with the aim of destabilizing Egypt and Nasser in particular. But the Egyptian security forces discovered it before it was set in motion. And a bunch of people were executed and some were imprisoned. Now we can go to yet a third example of Israeli state terrorism, which operated at the military level. The USS Liberty. Look at that poor ship. Blown to smithereens. Turns out, well, let's go through the casualties first. 34 Americans dead. 174 injured. That's 2/3 of the crew. Now, it was a NSA signal intelligence ship on a spy mission to monitor the Six-Day War between Israel and Egypt, well, several Arab countries. But it was flying an American flag and it was identified as an American vessel by Israel.
They knew.
But it was still attacked anyway. Look at it. It was, they strafed it with torpedoes, napalm, strafing fire in the Mediterranean, 12 miles west of a certain place that's been in the news lately, Gaza. And the attack may have occurred because they were concerned that the ship may have been collecting evidence of Israeli killing of Egyptian prisoners of war.
That's right.
In the city of Al Arish in the northern Sinai. So let's summarize Israel's capacity for terrorism. The King David Hotel bombing proved Israel's willingness to kill Jews. The Lavon affair proved Israelis' willingness to commit false flags. The USS Liberty confirmed Israel's ability to attack its greatest sponsor without any consequences whatsoever.
That's right. Well, I think the other important thing that you brought up was their support of the Muslim Brotherhood, which became Hamas. They needed a boogeyman. They needed a radicalized, angry group of people to demonize, to carry out these actions.
Yes, Israel created Hamas as a religious radical counterweight to the secular Palestinian Liberation Organization.
That's right.
So now we can go into evidence of foreknowledge. And there is a lot of it. There's Bush at Booker Elementary in Florida reading a book upside down. About my pet goat.
Talk about keeping it real.
Keeping it regular and realatory.
Yeah.
So in August 2001, Attorney General Ashcroft advised members of Congress and the Senate not to travel on commercial airlines. Asked if he knew anything about the nature of the threat, he said, frankly, I don't. That's the answer. So either that's a really callous dereliction of duty, or he knew and it was too hot to handle now. Yes, I am.
Mm-hmm.
And what else provided evidence of foreknowledge? 2 carrier groups were sent to the area. One to the Gulf of Arabia, just off the Pakistani coast. They were both off the Pakistani coast. 17,000 U.S. troops joined more than 20,000 NATO troops in Egypt for Operation Bright Star, scheduled for September 2 to 16, 2001. While 23,000 British troops steamed towards Oman, one of their former colonies, for Operation Swift Sword, which was held between August 15th and October 26th of 2001. The next one, we're starting to get into means here as well. Zim Shipping, a suspected intelligence front, broke their lease at the World Trade Center on September 6, even though they still owed 6 months on it. And they occupied all of the 16th floor of World Trade Center. I don't know exactly which one, but they also had significant amounts of space in the other building. So they had an entire floor.
Yeah, it's not cheap.
It's not cheap, but it gives them a lot of space for staging and logistics.
Yeah.
If the Israelis had a role, particularly in the demolition and the identity theft, which we'll get to later.
Yeah, and if you knew there was going to be nothing to pay for, why bother paying for it?
Just bag out. Certainly leave before the fateful day.
That's right.
And then W's brother, Jeb, who H.W. Bush thought would be the successor, he issued a executive order 01-261 on September 7th, allowing the Florida National Guard to assist law enforcement and emergency management personnel in the event of a large civil disturbances, disaster, or terrorism. And then there is the Odajo text messages. Odajo was a Israeli instant messaging platform, and it received messages 2 hours before the attack on the Twin Towers that it would happen. And needless to say, the company was cooperating with Israeli and American law enforcement to get to the bottom of this, Mark.
Mm-hmm.
Find out the original senders of these messages. So now we can get to Bush's actions at that time. He said, I saw an airplane hit the tower. The TV was obviously on. And I used to fly myself, and I said, that's one terrible pilot. And I said, it must have been a horrible accident. He saw the first plane hit? And also, why did the Secret Service not hustle W out of the elementary school right away? Because his public appearances were well known in public and
well publicized, well before
radio, TV.
Mm-hmm.
He would have been an obvious target for these horrible terrorists.
Yeah, why didn't a plane hit that school?
And then there's that moment where his chief of staff, Andrew Card, came by and whispered into his ear, telling him about the second plane hitting the World Trade Center.
That's right.
And Bush was still there. There's figures vary, let's say 10 to 20 more minutes. Evidence of foreknowledge.
Mm-hmm.
Now we can move on to the close ties between the Bush family and the Saudi elite. There's the king of Saudi Arabia giving W a smoochy poo.
Mm-hmm.
Give him a little smack. So we've talked about this before. The Bush family has ties in intelligence in the Saudi elite going way back.
Yeah.
But to keep it on 9/11, Bush tried his hand at oil, one half of the family business, the other half being politics.
That's right.
And his first business partner when he tried to make Arbusto was a fella named Jim Bath. And he was a CIA operative, and he got a lot of funding from the Bin Ladens, oddly enough. And he bought a lot of assets for the Bin Ladens, a bank, quite a bit of things, and invested in political dynasties like the Bushes as well. And the family's eldest son, Salim bin Laden, was named head of the bin Laden group, and he had ties to the American political elite. He probably funneled 34 million to the Contras. Well, according to French intelligence sources, he did. To the Contras in Nicaragua during the Reagan presidency. And I would hazard a guess that all covert ops during the Reagan administration ran through H.W. Bush.
Yeah.
And through these and other means, the bin Laden family kept developing close ties with the Bush family. And then we must consider that Osama bin Laden quite likely was a CIA asset named Tim Osman,
Mm-hmm.
or Othman, A-O-T-H. And bin Laden was strangely untouchable in the immediate run-up to 9/11. He arrived in Dubai on July 4th, 2001 from Pakistan with his own doctor, nurse, 4 bodyguards for urology treatment at an American hospital.
Yeah.
In Dubai, where he met Prince Turki Al Faisal, head of Saudi intelligence, the CIA station chief, a second CIA agent, and the station chief was recalled to Washington, I'm sure, for a debrief. And there was a pipeline of private planes of rich Gulf Emirate princes going between the Emirates and Quetta, Pakistan, on quote-unquote hunting trips in territories sympathetic to bin Laden. And sources confirm that these trips were opportunities for Saudi contacts with the Taliban and terrorists going back to 1994. Congressman Dana Rohrabacher said that our intelligence services knew where bin Laden was several times, quoting, but were not permitted to attack him because of decisions made by people higher up.
Mm-hmm.
I love this one because Condi Rice testified about it, and her voice started cracking when the hammer dropped. On August 6, 2001, getting close to September 11th now,
Mm-hmm.
Bush received his presidential daily brief, his intelligence brief, in the Texas White House.
Yeah.
Where he cleared a whole shitload of brush, Crawford, Texas.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, all right, you've covered your ass now, to the briefers. Like, yeah, we already knew. But what was the title of the brief? Someone asked Condi that under oath, and she's starting to crack. Her voice is starting to crack because I believe the title was Bin Laden Determined to Strike the U.S. Oh, well, you'd want to pay attention to that, one would think. And then we can't ignore that the Bush and bin Laden families have made millions together through the Carlyle Group, a private equity firm that's very heavy on the military investments and utilizing former heads of state like H.W. Bush as door openers, deal makers, and rainmakers. And in fact, there was a Carlyle Group meeting in Washington, D.C. at the Ritz-Carlton, which I believe is owned by the Saudis.
That's right.
And at this Carlyle Group meeting, H.W. Bush met with Osama bin Laden's brother, Shafiq, on the morning of 9/11. H.W. Bush is meeting with the patriarch of the bin Ladens in D.C.
Yeah.
through Carlyle Group on 9/11. Also in attendance is his former Secretary of Defense, Frank Carlucci, and his lifelong consigliere, James Baker, who, even though he's a deep state operative, at least had the poise of a diplomat. Blinken doesn't know what he's doing.
Yeah.
And there were other bin Ladens there as well. And it should be noted that Baker led the Bush-Gore team that installed W in the White House. And at 9:42, 9/11, FAA grounded all civil aviation all over continental United States. Next 2.5 hours, 3,300 commercial flights and 1,200 private planes all had to go to the closest airport. And yet, days later, dozens of members of the bin Laden family were flown out on their own private jet.
That's right.
And Osama bin Laden disavowed 9/11 on September 17th. I did not do it. He said, quote, I would like to assure the world that I did not plan the terrorist attacks, which seems to have been planned by people for personal reasons. I have been living in the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan and following its leader's rules. The current leader does not allow me to exercise such operations. And finally, 9/11 was never among the charges that the FBI had against bin Laden.
That's right.
Ay caramba.
And by all accounts, a genuinely, deeply religious man. Not that that means much when used cynically, but I think he was walking the straight and narrow as far as that's concerned.
Well, I think that could very well be true, while also it simultaneously being true that he was America's terrorist in Afghanistan, in the formation of the Mujahideen, in Chechnya, in Bosnia.
That's right.
Anywhere America was trying to pulverize a Muslim area. So let's look at the influence of Israel, Israeli corporations, Zionists outside of the United States, and Zionim. Zionim are helpers to Israeli intelligence. They're not in intelligence, but they can provide cars, safe houses, untraceable money, stuff like that. So first, let's look at the fact that these neocons who probably planned everything, well, not in the operational sense, in the strategic sense,
Sure.
a lot of them were dual citizens.
Yeah.
The list is long, Mark.
Yeah.
Elliot Abrams, lately reintroduced into government by Sleepy Joe.
Yeah.
John Bolton, whose walrus-like mustache becomes engorged with blood whenever he feels the thrill of tactical weapons possibly emerging from their chutes. Michael Chertoff, Elliot Cohn, Douglas Feith, Mark Grossman, Richard Haas, present chair of Council on Foreign Relations, Donald Kagan, brother-in-law of Victoria Nuland, brother
That's
of Robert
right.
Nixon, Louis Scooter Libby, Cheney's chief of staff during W, Richard Pearl, Prince of Darkness, the original neocon from the golden boy of the neocons in the early 70s, the guy who had the most power. Paul Wolfowitz, Dov Zakheim, CF comptroller of the Pentagon during 9/11, who will play a pivotal role that will say the names and name the deeds. Philip Zelikow, who then became the executive administrator of the 9/11 Commission and led it to its preordained conclusions, such as having no mention of World Trade Center 7.
Yeah.
And Robert Zolnick, who would later go on to be chair of World Bank. And possibly Bill Kristol, the epitome of continually failing upward.
Yeah. Thanks to dear old dad.
Dear old dad, the one of the real godfathers of the conservatives. So also too, we need to look at the policy brief that Richard Pearl had called A Clean Break in July 1996.
Mm-hmm.
He was going to provide, wait for it, Netanyahu, then Prime Minister,
Yeah.
with some advice on Middle Eastern geopolitics. And it emphasized a lot of things that would come to pass. Preemptive war, particularly against Iraq, Syria, Iran. Still the same bugaboos against the American imperial mind.
That's right.
And Pearl, who was with the American Enterprise Institute at the time, went on to serve as chair of the Defense Policy Board during W. Bush's administration. Douglas Feith, was named Bush's Undersecretary for Defense Policy, third highest ranking civilian.
Mm-hmm.
Also who General Tommy Franks called the fucking stupidest guy in the face of the earth.
Yeah.
Now we're going to spend a little bit more time with Mr. Zakheim, who was a particularly committed Zionist and particularly central to 9/11. Ordained rabbi, practicing Orthodox Jew, former Deputy Undersecretary for Defense and Planning and Resources during the Reagan years, even wrote a book criticizing America's lack of support for a native-built Israeli fighter jet called the Lavi. Let's go into his family history a bit. His father, Rabbi Jacob Zakheim, was born in 1910 near Bialystok on the Russia-Belarus border, a region where Itzhak Shamir, former Israeli prime minister, came from as well. And Dov Zakheim's father was a member of Betar. Betar was a revisionist Zionist youth movement founded in 1923 in Riga, Latvia, by Vladimir Yobotinsky, an arch-Zionist. Its main demand was the creation of a greater Israel. How great is great? You know what those two blue lines on the Israel state flag look like, or what they represent? The Nile,
river to the sea. Oh, okay.
That's their idea of the greater Israel.
Uh-huh.
So Betar, when they showed up in Palestine, joined the other terrorist groups of the day, like Irgun and Stern and Haganah and Lehi. So there was a plethora of Jewish terrorist organizations already operating in the British Mandate period. Zionists, or into the Zionist DNA, is inborn terrorism. Family friends of the Zakheims included another former prime minister, Menachem Begin, who led the King David hotel attack, and former three-time defense minister, foreign minister, ambassador to the United States, and mentor to a one Netanyahu, Moshe Arens. We're talking about the Zakheim family being closely related to some of the founding terrorists of Israel.
Mm-hmm.
And I would imagine that gives you a special sort of juice.
Sure.
Now, from 1998 to 2001, Zakheim was CEO of System Planning Corporation. Let's take a closer look at that company.
Sounds innocuous.
It doesn't it? SPC International. What could go wrong with it? It's just an acronym.
Yeah.
They had a subsidiary called Tridata Corporation. They were responsible for the recovery efforts at the World Trade Center after the 1993 bombings.
How convenient.
Yes, which gave them a copy of the complex's blueprints. Another company called Kroll, Kroll, the CIA of Wall Street, was also brought in by the Port Authority, who had the fee simple title to it, to coordinate a major security revamping after the 93 bombing. And we'll get to yet a third security organization, Stratosec Stratcom, in greater detail in a moment. And Marvin Bush is on the board, and they were the operational security agency.
Okay.
So we have connected to the deep state two security organizations and the operational one that had the day-to-day contract during 9/11, Stratosec.
Sure.
This company, SPC, they were diversified in their holdings, Mark French.
I would imagine.
Mitigate risk, right? Spread it around.
Right.
So one of their other holdings created a flight termination system, which enabled a remote source to take control of an aircraft, commercial jet aircraft, autopilot, and computers to take off, fly, and land any aircraft. And around 9/11, this Systems Planning Corporation was also contracted to send 32 Boeing KC-767 aircraft to MacDill Air Force Base, Florida, not far from the other one mentioned in Operation Northwoods.
Well, and it's so fantastic that you brought up Northwoods, because how much better do you think the technology and accuracy was 30 years on from that?
40. Yeah.
40. That's right.
Yeah, almost 40.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, much, much better, I would imagine.
Much better.
Yeah, and we'll get to Global Hawk, the first big drone, later too. So System Planning Corp, they had a contract to lease 32 of these. The KC-767s are modified 767s that are tanker planes, fuel tanker planes. And I think that might have been the type that hit World War One, hit World Trade Center 1. More details later. Details to come. So here we get into one of the most important and most tightly wrapped of motive and means together. World Trade Center 7 was the first commercial development from the ground up by a one Larry Silverstein.
Yeah.
In the 1980s. Go back to the construction of World Trade Centers 1 and 2. A slurry of concrete and asbestos was sprayed onto the structural steel for fire protection until the New York City Council outlawed asbestos in construction in 1971.
Yeah.
So this halted its use above the 40th floor on World Trade Center 1, and it wasn't used at all in the South Tower, World Trade Center 2. But there's a substantial amount of asbestos in World Trade Center 1.
Mm-hmm.
Dig this, my man. In mid-1990s, the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey estimated that the asbestos would cost about $1 billion to get rid of. That's 12 times what the building cost originally. But that didn't dissuade Mr. Silverstein from leasing the complex. So his group was originally outbid by Vornado Real Estate Trust, but the bid was withdrawn because the Port Authority refused to reduce the 99-year lease term.
Mm-hmm.
So Silverstein got it for $3.2 billion. He took out $3.5 billion in terrorism insurance.
That's right.
Asbestos in the building, terrorism insurance. Dots shortly to be connected, Mark.
How does that make any sense? Unless you know, how does that make any sense?
It makes a lot of sense. And if we look at the details of the deal in more particular, you'll see how much sense it makes.
Well, it makes perfect sense after the fact.
It was the largest real estate deal in New York's history at the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Which is a big deal for a town like New York.
Yeah.
It was not a small thing. There were hundreds and hundreds of newspaper articles about that deal going down.
Yeah, and they had to drop $800 million in fees and down payments right away for the lease. Of that $800 million, Silverstein, Stein or Steen? Ich weiß nicht. I do not know. But of the $800 million, Silverstein only had to put up $14 million. He had a couple whales, Lloyd Goldman and Joseph Carré. They each put in $100 million. And $127 million came from an interesting fella who was the proprietor of Westfield America. Westfield is an international shopping mall conglomerate, and they had the shopping mall concession at the World Trade Center complex. And of course, they got just commercial credit from GMAC, commercial mortgage, for $563 million. So there's that $800 million to get them the lease.
Yeah.
Let's look a little further into the guy who owns Westfield America, Frank Lowry. Frank Lowry fled Europe after World War II to Palestine, not Israel yet, and joined the Jewish terror group Haganah and the Golani Brigade, which is a pretty famous brigade in Israeli military. And then Lowry immigrated to Australia in 1952, made his fortune in shopping malls, and he was a former director of, wait for it, the Reserve Bank of Australia. From 95 to 2005. So one of their whale investors was an Australian Zionist.
That's right.
Terrorist. Literally. We're not done with all the Zionists involved in this deal, not by far. So Silverstein engineered this purchase through the Port Authority, and the head of that was a one Louis Eisenberg, a major Republican presidential fundraiser and chair of one of the presidential campaigns, maybe even more than one, very high-powered presidential fundraiser on the Republican side. Another American Zionist running the Port Authority, future ambassador to Italy and a certain offshore jurisdiction, San Marino. How do we know they're Zionists? Here's how we know. Silverstein and Eisenberg both held leadership positions in the United Jewish Appeal, a $1 billion Zionist charity organization. Right. Silverstein is the former chairman of the United Jewish Appeal, Federation of Jewish Philanthropies in New York. That's an umbrella organization that raises hundreds of millions of dollars every year from its network of member Zionist agencies.
Well, that's a fun way to put tax evasion too. That's extremely convenient to raise hundreds of millions of dollars and save from having to pay it as a taxable contribution.
And I believe one of their favorite charitable concerns was to fund the settlements.
Yeah.
The colonies on occupied Palestinian land.
Sure.
Now, Silverstein is no punk. He's friends with 3 Israeli prime ministers. And every Sunday he spoke with a one Netanyahu.
Wow.
And he once offered ex-prime minister Ehud Barak a job as his representative in Israel. And, Mark, it's good to have a wife because they can be so thoughtful. And Larry's wife was nice enough to remind him that he had a dermatology appointment on 9/11.
Wow.
Yeah, so he didn't go to work.
It's pretty convenient.
Yeah. Wow.
And by all accounts, he was in the building somewhere every single day.
He took his breakfast. He took breakfast at Top of the World every morning.
Yeah.
Where the only person that I knew who died on 9/11, Heather Ho, was a pastry chef. So she may have fed Mr. Silverstein.
Yeah.
So then we want to focus on the day of 9/11 primarily, but to emphasize the Zionist connection, let's look at where the court where all of the suits all the 9/11 suits went.
Sure.
Federal District Court of Manhattan, Judge Alvin Hellerstein. And it was in that court that Larry Silverstein's lawyers argued that it was 2 terrorist events and that therefore he should get a double payout.
Double payment, yeah.
He didn't get the full double $7 million, but they settled for a cool 4.6. And including $861 million for Building 7, which collapsed into a free fall even though it wasn't hit by a plane.
That's right.
And there was a secret codicil in the contract between Silverstein and his group and the Port Authority. Silverstein and his 2 whales and his Zionist whale, they were all repaid in 2004.
Yeah.
So
you better be 14 million for 4.6 billion.
You got the punchline, Mark.
Yeah, you're calling in that Vic, man.
Because they were hearing the case before a Zionist judge, they got $4.6 billion out of a $14.6 million investment that itself was refunded in 2004.
Mm-hmm.
So he got 4.6 for nothing.
Yeah.
With no risk, because that 14 million was going to be repaid anyway. $4.6 billion from $0. That is a hell of a return.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Judge Hellerstein had all of the 9/11 litigation. And that included some suits against the airlines and a security firm that operated in a lot of the originating airports of the so-called terrorists, Huntley, USA. Security firm Huntley, USA. We'll come back to that. So in these courts, the families, they didn't want the money. And Judge Hallerstein is saying, oh, money's the best lubricant. They didn't want the money. They wanted answers. They wanted a public soul searching, a public reckoning. How did the policies of the airlines and the security firms allow this to happen?
Yeah.
And they had done their own legal discovery. They had tons of the families had tons of internal documents and depositions. Judge Hallerstein never let any of this go before a jury. No litigation discovery material was ever made public. No case ever went to trial. None of the family's aspirations for a public accountability were ever realized. And like Eisenberg and Silverstein, Hallerstein is also an Orthodox Jew and committed Zionist with close ties to Israel. Let's look at his son's work in the legal field. Joseph Hellerstein. They both immigrated from the United States to the occupied West Bank. In Israel, Joseph Hellerstein practices with the important Israeli law firm Amit Polak and Matalon. In that firm, he represents international consultants on targeted security who own Huntley USA, one of the security firms that was in the originating airports that the families wanted information about. And they sold services, security services, to every airport from which these so alleged hijacked planes operated. And before that, both father and son had worked for Stroke, and Lavana, a New York City law firm, which has a long history of representing Rothschild and other elite Zionist interests. Sensing a pattern here, Mark?
Yeah. The Hunley airline connection. That's amazing.
Yeah. His son represents the security firm that was a subject of suits in his dad's court.
Yeah. Conflict of interest much?
Oh, dear Lord. So now it's time to look at the Israeli spy ring in the United States,
Sure.
which was very active. In fact, 5 spies were arrested in the tiny town of Hollywood, Florida,
Wow.
where 4 of the 9/11 hijackers were getting trained at a deep state Huffman Aviation Airport. This is Le Monde. This is Reuters. This is Jane's Intelligence Digest. This isn't Joe's Conspiracy Crab Shack
Right.
providing this type of information.
Which is probably the only restaurant still to this day in Hollywood, Florida.
In fact, Mark, dig this. Atta and his boys were living at 3389 Sheridan Street, Hollywood, Florida. Several Israeli spies were discovered living at 4220 Sheridan Street, Hollywood, Florida. Israeli spies appear to have been close to at least 10 of the 19 alleged hijackers.
Mm-hmm.
And up to 10 of the hijackers, I believe, were not hijackers. Those were identities that were stolen. We'll get to that more detail later.
Sure.
So the actual human bodies that are going to be moved around like pawn pieces are being trailed by Mossad.
That's right.
To the point of being houses away from them.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you know, when this all came to light after 9/11 too. March 6, 2002. Don't worry, Mark. Washington Post said it never happened. They denied the existence of any spy ring. Why? Because a wide array of U.S. officials denied it. Justice Department spokeswoman Susan Dryden said, there seems to be some kind of an urban myth that's been circulating for months. New York Times doesn't cover it at all. Salon, which in 2002 was still okay and not fully a part of the Blue MAGA media,
Sure.
and the No Matter Who crew. And in May 2002, Salon took note of what Jane's Intelligence said, which has a lot of credibility, that it is rather strange that the U.S. media seems to be ignoring what may well be the most explosive story since the 9/11 attacks. The alleged breakup of a major Israel espionage operation in the United States. So they were running themselves as art students, by and large, which will tie into some very interesting artists doing very interesting work.
CIA and art has a very long history. Jackson Pollock much?
Yeah, abstract expressionism and soft power being subsidized by CIA is a thing. But Gelatin and the E-Team in some live work studios in the World Trade Center, we'll get to that. They probably played a crucial role in the controlled demolition.
Yeah.
But back to our Israeli spy ring, they all said that they came from Bezalel Academy or the University of Jerusalem. You look at Bezalel Academy student rosters, there's no such people. You look at University of Jerusalem rosters, oh, wait, you can't, because it doesn't exist. It's not a university.
Yeah.
So it seems like they were in town to, and a lot of them were caught kind of probing DEA employees and DEA field offices, which this gets us further afield than 9/11. They might have been doing that because, they might have, here's my personal theory. I haven't really developed conclusive proof. They leave the coke to the CIA, heroin to the CIA, a lot to the Mexican cartels. They might have been the Molly dealers. Who knows?
Oh, that would make a lot of sense.
But I don't know. Let's focus on them as it pertains to 9/11.
Sure.
They're probably doing a lot of monitoring of the bodies, not the identity thief names involved with 9/11. And the bodies, how did they get to America? There was an employee at the U.S. consulate in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, Abdullah Numan, where a number of the hijackers, my notes say 15 of the 19, but I don't know if 15 were actual bodies, because I think the ID thieves total might have gone as high as 10. But a number of them got their visas through this consulate, and he took payoffs, and he pleads guilty. He's convicted. Okay, he's the fall guy. Problem solved, problem addressed, problem covered up.
Neat and tidy.
Now let's go back to the other security organization that was doing the daily security on the day of 9/11. So we have Kroll and Tridata that did it, security revamp after the 93 bombing. And since then, Stratasac and Securicom is the day-to-day security firm. So you've got Zim shipping with an entire floor. You've got Marvin Bush, who's that fella on the right.
Yeah.
On the board of this company.
The other guy looks like a younger Silverstein.
And it's exactly who it is.
Yeah.
Charming, dashing, wrinkled dashing. So if controlled demolition was involved, and I think it was, it could have been prepared during official repair, maintenance, improvement work, during the reconstruction after 1993 bombing.
Yeah.
Elevator modifications, fireproofing, electrical and telecoms work. There's a lot of kind of routine maintenance and upgrades like that it could have been folded into.
Absolutely.
That's one mechanism. And Gelatin and E-Team will be another. So, and then the firms in the impact area of North Tower, South Tower are just a smorgasbord of deep state connections as well. So the impact zones have the deep state actors. You got the security company. You got an entire floor for logistics. The weekend before 9/11, there was a power down. Complete power down. No locks. No security cameras. Nothing. Eyewitnesses said that there was an unusually large amount of people that didn't normally work there, and that they had very large boxes and huge spools of wire. And it was said to be internet cable upgrades. So Marvin Bush is a shareholder on Securicom Stratsec and a principal. And they had the $8.3 million contract to upgrade security after the 93 bombing. And they ran security at Dulles too, one of the originating airports. That's the one that hit the Pentagon, allegedly.
Right.
And they provided security, but that was in the 90s for United Airlines, but they're plugged in. And one of the primary investors in this company was the Kuwait American Corp. So it's not just Saudi elite, it's Kuwaiti elite. Another Securicom client was Los Alamos Laboratories, which was developing the type of super nanothermite that was probably utilized in the demolition. We're going to have more than one way for this consortium to get their hands on nanothermite, and that's the first one we'll introduce. There had also been an unusually large amount of fire drills and safety evacuation in the weeks running up to 9/11. And the security alert had been lifted 5 days before. So suddenly the patrols of bomb-sniffing dogs are gone as well. Now we can get to some really crazy stuff. This is the art groups, Gelatin and E-Team.
Yeah.
There's a little tantalizing taste of them. We'll go in detail into these guys because I think they played a fundamental role in the controlled demolition. Two art groups, Gelatin and E-Team. The Lower Manhattan Cultural Council selected them to be part of the Worldviews program, to have live workspace, 91st floor, for 4 years.
It'd be really cool to find out who was on that group's board.
I think that I've seen reports that they have intelligence, Israeli intelligence on the art council, on the Lower Manhattan Cultural Council's board is very likely Israel connected as well.
What a shocking surprise.
So they get Gelatin and E-Team into the 91st floor and 92nd floor of the North Tower for 4 years.
Wow.
So you've got an entire floor for Zim shipping, and you've got the live workspace of these artists to really figure shit out for years. And, part of the perks, they were also given temporary construction IDs.
Wow.
These artists.
Yeah.
Which gave them full run of the place.
Right. Cargo elevators, material.
Everything. And
everything.
who's going to look at them? Stratasac and Securicom, just tied to Marvin Bush. I'm sure that this is all just a cascade of coincidences.
I think that's the definition of circle jerk in the dictionary.
If you look at the definition, there's a picture of it right there.
Yeah.
So this included weekends. No one's around. Do your work in private.
Nobody's around.
Yep. So they got 24/7 access to the entire complex, weekends included.
I mean, every normal person is out of that building except the cleaning crew, between 5 p.m. and 8 p.m.?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, even if you're trying to make an honest living and you're in there just a normal bean counter, you got to get on the train and go home. that building's going to be empty by 8 or 9 o'clock at night. At
Empty all
worst.
weekend.
Yeah. And
Yes.
all weekend. That's right.
Yeah. So there's a lot of overlap between these two groups, Gelatin and E-Team.
Mm-hmm.
A little difficult to keep their projects straight because they overlap one upon the other.
Sure.
So let's examine first Gelatin. And let's examine the name first. What is gelatin?
Yeah.
As a noun, it is not just a delicious dessert and snack. It's also another word for dynamite, for explosives. Who developed gelatin? Alfred Nobel, the inventor of dynamite, namesake of the vaunted Nobel Prize.
That's right.
The art group named themselves Dynamite. And their crazy project was to build a temporary balcony on the 91st floor. And to give themselves a little privacy, there they are at the 91st floor looking out. To give themselves a little privacy, they cordoned it all off with cardboard boxes.
Yeah.
What kind of cardboard boxes, you may ask? It's a little difficult to see, but if you look at the picture on the left at the guy's knees, the picture on the left, guy on the left, look at his knees, follow that little bench to the cardboard. You see figure in dark bold, figure dash figure. And look on the right picture above that guy. Look in the upper right of the photo on the right.
Mm-hmm.
Again, figure, that is more legible. Figure dash figure.
Yeah.
What are those figures? BB18. BB18 is the model number for a fuse holder accessory. You're a demolition expert.
That's a lot of fuses.
What do we use fuses for, Mark?
You cover an entire floor in fuses. That's a lot of fuses in empty fuse boxes.
Here's from the company website. The purpose of the product is to save space and workload in a complicated wiring situation.
Yeah.
Decreases wiring terminations. Small footprint reduces space requirements, reduces assembly time, prevents accidental finger exposure, quick and safe method of changing fuse holder configurations, allows for future expansion.
Yeah.
Improves troubleshooting, eliminates power distribution block. So look at these guys. They had blocked off to build this balcony that they're going to build with box upon box. There's more, a different view.
Yeah.
Box upon boxes of the fuses. They're named after dynamite. Their artwork is protected from public view by the boxes of fuses. It's absolutely surreal.
Yeah.
And they built their little balcony. There it is.
Wow, look at that in scale. That's incredible.
Fucking is giving me vertigo just looking at it.
Yeah.
And then they made they released a book, kind of like a project, like all of their project sketches, design sketches, and really surreal, bizarre comments.
Mm-hmm.
Like that one. Let's try and expand this. Okay, you see that one in the middle?
Yeah.
It says the guy's falling. 30 meters of pure pleasure. I mean, I encourage our 5 viewers to go to stonefruit.substack.com, where all of these comments are easier to read, but they all evince a similar, extremely surreal and psychotic sense of humor. And let's see if I can read some of them. Okay. On the far left, these things in the bottom left, the lines of text, the handwritten text. Crimson red, the act was a crime against corporate law. And you see the tall tower is the Twin Towers.
Yeah.
The smaller tower is probably the Millennium Hilton, which we'll get to in a moment.
Sure.
Where they watch the events,
right.
They unfold.
Mm-hmm. Of course.
They monitor everything.
Well, you want to see your work.
Yeah. You want to take pride in your work.
That's right.
But it wasn't just doodlings and psychotic words. Some of that shit looked like actually practical wiring diagrams.
Yeah, that would make sense to a lot of electricians or, people that handle explosives.
Like this cross section right here, they figured out. Well, they had the blueprints from Tridata Systems, Dov Zakheim's company.
That's right.
So here they are identifying all of the central columns that held the weight of the building.
Mm-hmm.
All of the load-bearing weight was on these central columns, so that they wouldn't have columns in the office space.
Right.
And there's the helicopter again, checking on their work, admiring it. Mm-hmm. And you can see across the street, there's the hotel again, taking a global view of the scene.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and this book is on Amazon for like $1,500 used.
I bet it is.
It exists as a book you can buy.
That's amazing.
The project manifest of they're building a balcony on the 91st floor.
Yeah.
It's absolutely mental. Now, it's too small to read, but in the left image, you see the Twin Towers and this kind of bell under it.
Sure.
I'll read from the top down to try and give you a sample of the psychosis. The satellite above the Twin Towers, it says fame, satellite, phone talk with mama, funnies on satellite TV. Then that kind of halo around around the Twin Towers, it's called happiness, fluffy clouds. And then the text just above to the right of the Twin Towers, it says, last chance to open a parachute. Now, if we have any skydivers among our 5 viewers, they may be familiar with halo jumps, high altitude, altitude, low open.
Yeah.
So you jump at high altitude, and what they mean by low open, these are about 1,000 feet, 3,500, 350 meters.
Pull it immediately.
Yeah. So
when you
get to 1,000 feet, pull. That's
yep.
low open. So it says last chance to open parachute.
Yeah.
So the Israeli military may not have been sufficient to defend against electrified paragliders, but I'm sure that they have dozens of people who are very capable halo jumpers.
Uh-huh.
So then let's go down the Twin Towers to the like psychotic text. Lost balloons, Rapunzel, Gelatin's 20-minute balcony, flying naked in a dream.
20-minute balcony.
That's they had to remove the heavy panes of glass with suction cups, make the balcony, take the balcony out, put the glass back up.
Yeah.
And then at the bottom, there's a scratch. It says most popular suicide height. Hey, you only need 3 or 4 stories to die.
Right.
And then go into the bell, go into the subterranean of your own consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
And it says a gum machine, biggest worm population, buried hope, decrepit thought Mr. Freud ever had, bird I buried, diamonds, chambers for S&M lust.
Wow.
When we consider that one of the skeleton keys of the deep state might be sadomasochism, satanic ritual abuse, pedophilia, sex trafficking, for them to write chambers for S&M lust, a lot of this involves hiding in plain sight.
Well, and to squeeze the Antwerp diamond conglomerate in there. Like, why would you mention diamonds for no reason whatsoever? It's weird.
Good point. And in that bell, in the subterranean, in the subconscious, there is also hidden military action.
Yeah, right.
That's what it says.
Yeah.
Which is right about where they probably would have put the suitcase nukes.
That's right.
More on that later.
Yeah.
We have the details, our faithful 5 listeners.
Mm-hmm.
And we are on YouTube as Ahead of the Curve. We are on BitChute. We are on Odyssey. We are on Locals. We are on Rumble.
Rumble.
Who's ready to rumble?
Oh, you say, yeah. Oh, good. You said it a little bit different. Buffer will actually send you a bill for 25 grand if you say it like him. Oh, so dear. I'm glad you botched that a little bit.
Oh dear.
Yeah, be careful. Don't do that again.
Okay, I won't. So beneath the chambers for S&M lust and hidden military actions, hole to escape shame.
Wow.
Professor Nietzsche's office. And then at the very bottom, shame. It's absolutely, completely mental. So they've built their tower or their balcony.
Mm-hmm.
There was, and then E-Team did a project utilizing the spot of the balcony after they have reinserted the
glass
window pane glass.
Yeah.
And it was and this is, if you go to stonefruit.substack.com, there's links for everything. And there's links to a video of this art event where they rent a helicopter. They go and fly in front of the 91st floor where the balcony had been made, but had been then taken down and glass reestablished. And people just took their photos they stood where the balcony had been made and had their photos taken from a helicopter. That's the E-Team.
Wow.
Called Quick Click.
Yeah.
And I would imagine that in the spirit of hiding in plain sight, that among the people whose photographs were taken by the people in the helicopter included the people who planted the explosives.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely.
And in the "you can't make this shit up" department, in the tail number of the helicopter on the YouTube video of Quick Click by the E-Team is 666. So let's look at another project that the E-Team did. Very close partners to gelatin, a synonym for explosive. Here's one they had.
Wow.
The E-Team asked the businesses in the upper reaches of one of the Twin Towers to close or leave open their windows for the night so that the phrase E-Team could be illuminated.
Yeah.
Look about where it's illuminated.
Wow. What a shocking surprise.
Yeah. How about that? Again, I'm sure it's a coincidence.
Yeah.
That E-Team project is actually a little bit lower than the actual impact area, but it immediately brings to mind the possibility that as a part of free access to the building, they not only planted all the nanothermite, but they might have planted homing devices for the planes that were commandeered by the flight termination system of Dov Zakheim's company to follow the homing signal.
Yeah.
Without any necessity for any pilot activity whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
Or pilots knowing what's going on. Atta might have said, no! So let's go back to the hotel that had the global eye on it all. You see it here as a small one in the corner. And you see it. Oh, I'm not there. We'll go with this one with the cross section. Okay, upper left, Millennium. That's the Millennium Hilton.
Yeah.
August 18, 2001. We're right before 9/11. New York Times, even they had difficulty keeping the two groups and their works apart. They interviewed Josh Harris, quoting New York Times, Josh Harris, the internet entrepreneur once known for holding extravagant art parties, rented a top floor suite at the Millennium Hilton across the street the evening before B Thing and invited people to what guests described as a night of decadence. I can only imagine.
Yeah.
I mean, how close was it to the S&M shame in the crazy artist sketchbook? How close is it to Epstein Island? How close is it to the scandal and Craig Spence and all of the instances in which sex trafficking and pedophilia seem to be so integral to elite political power?
I don't think Eyes Wide Shut came out very long after.
And see what it did for Kubrick's health.
Yeah.
So then they had their party, and there's some weird videos of Josh Harris. He did seem to use his money to just host these really wild, crazy parties that were kind of half party, half art installation.
Sure.
And after their night of debauchery, they had what was called a, quote, euphoric breakfast. And Josh Harris actually showed the New York Times reporter credit cards that they had rented the hotel and the helicopter. So he might have been a pseudonym or even an unwitting pseudonym.
Sure.
facilitating the work of the Mossad
Uh-huh.
under guise of art and decadence.
Yeah.
So a lot of art shows, exhibitions have artist statements.
Mm-hmm.
Here's one they wrote for their balcony. And since it's so perverse, let's read it in full.
Yeah.
Surgical intervention in the World Trade Center in New York City. Everything top secret and illegal, of course. In days of conspiratorial work, somewhere on the 148th floor and using building refuse they had tediously smuggled into the building under their pullovers, they constructed a functional load-bearing balcony. In a long, complicated process, they scratched putty with from the tall, heavy window, which couldn't be opened. They extracted it using suction pads, shunted the balcony out, posed on it at 6 a.m, and had themselves photographed there from a helicopter for their nearest and dearest back home.
Yeah.
Like their Mossad commanders.
That's right.
They kept very mum about it all, because if word had crept out about their coup, they could have been fined very heavily for sabotaging a national treasure, or it would have blown the whole operation. Even if it was built by Japanese.
Yeah.
Incidentally, as proof they were there, there is now a piece of old chewing gum stuck to the outside of the building at a dizzy height. Signed A1, Tex Rabinowitz. That is an odd pseudonym, because that's actually a rockabilly guy, Tex Rabinowitz. So,
yeah.
So these psychos had 4 years of access to the building with 24/7 all access pass with those construction passes. So is it not unreasonable to conjecture that an art group named after explosives might have and with cardboard boxes of fuses might have been in charge of possibly a painted type of nanothermite?
You can get a lot done in 4 years with full access and carte blanche.
And for the final capper, the power down that weekend before.
Yep.
And I believe there is a type of paint on nanothermite as well that might have helped speed proceedings.
Yep.
43 core columns. Interior core columns every 6 floors. Corner sections every 12 to 15 floors. Once done, I'm quoting here, you can get the link at Substack. Once done, they lit up the entire impact zone with their name E-Team to make sure it lined up perfectly inside and outside. Could the E and E-Team have been explosives? Maybe. One is definitely named after dynamite. One's called the E-Team, explosive team. They're taking pictures of themselves. Their artist sketches say what they're doing. The artist statement says what they're doing. There is a unique character on Twitter, Michael Hoffman, who proposed an idea of a shadow government called a cryptocracy that derives its power in part, quote, by telling you what they're doing to you. As part of what he termed revelation of the method, this is a scheme according to which a population is informed of its manipulation and degradation, but which takes no action to oppose its oppression, has thus been further initiated into enslavement and exponentially subjugated.
Well, it means the population's asking for it and they okay it.
Yes, they've been shown what's going to be done to them, and then it's done to them. Now we get into more circumstantial evidence, but just to give our 5 viewers a flavor of the intensely dense intertwining of deep state organizations and individuals in both the North Tower and South Tower impact zones, which include more Zionists. I know you're shocked. Hang on.
I'm not. It's been going on for a long time.
Very long. Another key Zionist power broker in the United States is Morris Greenberg, member of the Trilateral Commission,
Yeah,
which Brzezinski was head of, that combined the interests of Europe, Japan, and the United States.
that's right.
He was also a former deputy chairman of the Council of Foreign Relations. Hello. Former chair of the New York Fed. Godfather of AIG, which when it went bankrupt was just made whole by the taxpayer.
Mm-hmm.
Notable CIA ties, Kissinger ties, Mossad ties, and Anti-Defamation League. They are not a watchdog for Jewish rights in America. Perhaps they used to be more so. They are a tool of Zionist activity. This and Greenberg also has, they're allegedly a tool of Zionists, because I don't want to get demonetized or thrown off. Anti-Defamation League does great work, but Greenberg was also associated with the Mossad.
Sure.
And his son, Jeffrey Greenberg, was a member of other of our favorite think tanks like Brookings, Trilateral again. Now we get into the North Impact Zone tenants. He was chairman of Marsh McLellan on 9/11. Now, they were one of the 3 companies that had held insurance on World Trade Center, but dumped it shortly before 9/11. Imagine that.
Genius move.
Just a coincidence. And Marsh McLellan had 1,775 employees in World Trade
That's right.
Center 1
Yep.
and 2 on 9/11.
Yep.
Including in the precise strike zone. See, the E-team was a couple floors low. The precise strike zone of North Tower is floors 94 to 99.
Yep.
Now, a number of talking heads got on the media right the day of 9/11 to control the narrative right away, to establish the narrative right away. One of which was Paul Bremer.
Mm-hmm.
Now, of course, he would later go on to be the viceroy of Iraq during the American occupation.
Yeah.
And pulverization of that once stable and prosperous nation. And the result of our destruction of that country and occupation has been to drive it closer to America's supposed enemy, Iran. But anywho, before Bremer became the viceroy of Iraq, he was he appeared on the news, but he was CEO of Marsh's Political Risk Practice Group, subsidiary of Marsh McLellan. Bremer had an office in the South Tower. Guess who he was an aide to, Mr. French?
Rumsfeld? No, that was Wolfowitz.
Opposite, someone who is still with us. A secret swinger.
Yeah.
The counterpart to Brzezinski.
Uh-huh.
Henry Kissinger.
Yeah.
Paul Bremer was a Kissinger aide when he was in government in the 70s. Paul Bremer was a managing director of Kissinger Associates. Then he was chair of the Marsh Risk Practice Group. subsidiary of Marsh McLellan, which used to hold insurance on 9/11 but sold it in the weeks running up to it. So he's a member of the Marsh McLellan family. You'd think he'd mention something about the 1,700 employees that were in the Twin Towers and some that were in the immediate strike zone.
Yeah.
No.
What did you choose to say instead?
No. Let's look at what he said instead.
Yeah.
He said that they had definitive proof that it was Osama bin Laden quote, this is Brimmer, Osama bin Laden is responsible. Possibly Iran and Iraq too. And we must have the most severe military response. And then I love this. The irony is just too rich. The American way of life is not threatened by these people unless we threaten it ourselves. If we start throwing away the democratic freedoms and civil liberties that are at the heart of our society,
sure,
that's what they're after. And of course, immediately after 9/11, the Patriot Act.
They enacted a bill that was already written to attack civil liberties immediately.
Yeah. Came into pass in 6 weeks. And of the 1,700, 295 Marsh McLellan employees were killed.
Mm-hmm.
Now let's look at the South Impact Zone. Circumstantial, but any one of the people that we're about to describe, or two, could have been an entry point when you have the artist with the construction pass, when you have a Zim Shipping having a whole floor, when there's two moving companies that we'll get to later. They also have two Mossad front moving companies.
Yeah.
So they have all the logistics down pat. All sorted out. So let's look at the South Tower Impact Zone. Prior to 2000, Fuji Bank was the second largest bank in Japan. And their largest investors were Union Carbide, Mobil Oil, Raytheon, resource extraction, oil, military. Mizuho Holdings controlled companies not only in the impact zone of the South Tower, but also on floors 48 to 50 of the North Tower. But we're looking at the South Tower here. So these are the tenants of the South Tower Impact Zone. Toro Hashimoto, chairman of Fuji Bank, was also with Deutsche Securities Tokyo and would later go on to be on the board of Deutsche Bank with Norman Augustine. More on Augustine in a second. Now, in motive, we talked about Deutsche Bank had bought the deputy director of CIA on 9/11, A.B. Krongard, his investment bank, Alex Brown, vision of Deutsche Bank, later implicated in the stock puts of companies that would suffer on 9/11.
Absolutely.
Back to Norman Augustine, who was on the board with the chairman of Fuji Bank. CEO of Lockheed Martin, founder of CIA venture capital group InQtel, board member of Riggs Bank, which serviced the diplomatic corps of DC.
That's right.
And we talked extensively about, and had a subsidiary run by H.W. Bush's brother, Jonathan Bush.
That's right.
Riggs Bank. Also in the impact zone is Baseline Financial Services, floors 77 to 78. Their chair is a fella, Joseph Kaspudes. He worked in the Department of Commerce during the Ford administration with Bush family consigliere Jim Baker, and was instrumental in the creation of the Department of Energy during the Carter administration.
Mm.
And he retained the connections to the Department of Energy that he helped found, Kaspudes did, to 1997. Department of Energy runs all the national labs like Sandia, Los Alamos. So Securicom has the security contract with Los Alamos, let's say, which was working on nanothermite. And Kaspudes has connections, deep connections to the Department of Energy, which runs the labs. He was also a member of the Logistics Management Institute, whose members included Paul Kaminsky, also of CIA venture capital firm In-Q-Tel, and a board member of General Dynamics. Charles DiBona, also in Logistics Management Institute, of Halliburton. And Skull and Bones member Joseph Samuel Nye. And Michael Daniels of Science Applications International Corporation, a major defense contractor with expertise in thermite that played a large role in the NIST investigations of how the towers fell.
This was buttoned up, straight up and down.
These are the tenants in the South Tower impact zone.
Yeah.
And Logistics Management Institution's slogan is advancing the science of government.
And how?
Yep. So the tenant, Baseline Financial, modified the southeast corner of floor 78 in 1999,
Mm-hmm.
exactly where the aircraft hit on 9/11.
Yep.
And floors 77 and 78 were upgraded for fireproofing in June and April of 1998. What do you know about that?
Yeah.
Now we're into controlled demolition, my friend. And here there are lots of links. 5 viewers go to stonefruit.substack.com. Richard Gage, Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth, very good. Kevin Ryan, who was a site manager for Underwriters Laboratory, which had done the original safety checkoff for the structural steel. He's another great whistleblower, and well, not whistleblower, but a guy examining from a place of intimate knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
So as we look at controlled demolition, let's just rattle off a few facts. 499,000 pieces of steel were shipped off to China before there was any forensic analysis. 499,000. You know how many were kept? 263 pieces. The South Tower fell first, even though it was hit second. They were both designed to withstand the impact of a 707, the largest plane of its time.
Yep.
At the time of construction. So these buildings fell with no resistance from 200,000 tons of structural steel. World Trade Center in 8 seconds, World Trade Center 2, 10 seconds, World Trade Center 7 in 6 seconds. And we'll get to how fragile aluminum planes are in a second. Somehow these fragile aluminum planes that would have likely been stopped cold by all that steel and rained down upon the plaza below in tattered bits of aluminum, they went through. So 200,000 tons of structural steel, 400,000 cubic yards of concrete turned almost entirely to a pyroclastic dust cloud. When the official conspiracy theory is that they all pancaked and that it was gravity. So let's always bear in mind the official conspiracy theory is the floors pancaked one upon the other. So there's a lot of anomalies even if you agree with the official conspiracy theory. For those that don't know, pyroclastic, it's like pyroclastic volcanoes like Mount St. Helens. It's something between liquid and smoke, magma and gases. Hot magma and sharks with lasers.
Yeah.
So molten metal was recorded, was videotaped dripping out of the 81st floor. That requires sustained heat of 2,500 degrees Fahrenheit. Jet fuel kerosene burns at 600 degrees Fahrenheit. And 90% of that even burnt outside of the building.
Yeah.
The seismic record. Palisades seismic data. 2 huge bursts of energy beneath World Trade Center immediately prior to the collapse. Not when all this alleged weight that had vaporized hit the ground, but immediately prior to the collapse. The 10-second collapse, South Tower, registered as a 2.3 quake.
Yeah.
The North Tower registered, South Tower registered as a 2.1 quake. North Tower registered as a 2.3 quake. Before the buildings fell.
Yeah.
Suitcase nuke to hit the structural columns at the base. Seismologist Thorne Lay of University of California at Santa Cruz told AFP that it was like an underground nuclear explosion had appeared on the seismograph. So what are the characteristics of controlled demolition? I've done a lot of talking. You're the demolition expert. Would you read the list, please?
Sudden onset, which was definitely the case. It went straight down, which is not normal in any other situation whatsoever. Almost free fall speed, also not normal in any other situation. Total collapse, sliced steel, pulverization of concrete and other materials, which happened rapidly. Dust clouds, horizontal ejections, demolition rings, sounds produced by explosions, which first responders and people in the building witnessed in real time over and over again, and molten steel.
Quite so. World Trade Center 7 is a smoking gun and is an obvious entry point for anyone that wants to learn what happened. Another smoking gun is that there were tons of nanothermite spheres smaller than 1/1000th of a human hair, all over lower Manhattan.
Yep.
If it was a pancake and a gravity fall, why were there microscopic nanothermite spheroids all over lower Manhattan? The links are all there at Substack.
So it's only one way that can happen.
This is scientific fact.
Yep.
These nanothermite microscopic spheres were all over lower Manhattan. Further puzzling evidence. NASA remote sensing of the temperatures at ground zero.
Mm-hmm.
East corner.
Sometimes up to like 2,400 degrees, I think.
I'll give
Really
you
hot.
exact figures coming right up. Served hot off the griddle, Mark French. East corner, South Tower, highest temperature, 1,377 degrees Fahrenheit. However, that's half of the heat of the molten steel in the basement. September 11, the steel remained in a molten state at ground zero. September, October, November, December. I'm not making this show up. It's all documented.
Yep.
Now, go back to that chart. Number 8, horizontal ejections is very, very important.
It is.
If this is a gravity fall, everything should just be plummeting straight to the earth.
That would not occur.
What kind
And
of
it occurred in every direction. If the wind, let's pretend that there was a tropical storm nearby and there was a wind heavy enough to carry that in one direction. It's not possible for that material to blow in every direction at the same velocity. That's just, it's ridiculous. It's not possible for that to happen in nature during a building drop. It just does not happen like that.
It's not only horizontal, it's upward and then horizontal.
That's exactly right.
Let's look into that in further detail. Multiple 100-ton pieces of structural steel flew 500 feet. If this is a gravity fall, that doesn't happen.
No.
300-ton pieces of structural steel flew into both Winter Garden and the American Express building. Notice the pyroclastic clouds went up and outward. Squibs, which set off the... Tell us what squibs are, Mr. French.
I don't know. It's not coming to me right now.
Oh, for demolition, I'm a total layman, so I may have the term wrong. But squibs, I've heard as kind of like the pre-detonation or something. And
sure,
if you look at the videos of the towers falling, if you look about 5 floors just beneath,
you'll see it over pop 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 pop. You'll see, yeah, you can see it. You can see the orange. You can see the pops, and then because you brought that up, the other strange thing about that day at the ground level, is the amount of cars and how far away they were that were burnt completely to a crisp. That makes absolutely no sense whatsoever for a building just dropping of its own accord at gravity. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, the cars, the rubber tires
Melted.
yeah,
Literally melted. If
and
you purposely stick a bunch of paper towel and dip it in gas and chuck it into a car's gas tank and light it and watch that car burn, it's not going to completely melt in the fashion that there were cars all around that area, almost to a quarter of a mile away, completely burnt to a crisp. There's no way every single one of those cars was completely full of gasoline. There's no fire that can make that make any sense. There was an incredible amount of heat and explosive energy. It's the only thing that could have done that to an automobile, especially that many, that far away. It just doesn't make any sense otherwise.
yeah, we're led to believe that this is a gravity fall. Okay, but like you said, there's cars for hundreds of meters in every direction that the tires are completely melted, and say all the handles and everything that's plastic is melted, and the paint is completely gone and oxidized. The steel of the car is still there, but anything that can be flash melted, like plastic door handles and
Gone.
and the rubber on the tires, gone. Paint oxidized from a free fall, from a gravity fall, or from extreme heat in the pyroclastic clouds. And there were a lot of people fleeing ground zero that were like that iconic photo of the little girl running down the country road in the Vietnam War after she's been napalmed and her skin is hanging from her body.
Skin flopping off. Yeah.
Yeah, there were a lot of people that had their skin all flopped off like that.
Yeah.
So we got squibs, and so the top third of the towers vaporize, and yet they still have the weight to crush the floors below. And if you recall the plummeting of the North Tower, the second one to fall, first one to hit, second one to fall, North Tower. It looked like the entire top third of the building tilted. If that was a gravity fall, you would expect the entire top third of the building to fall to earth, but it vaporized. And then there's the French brothers Nadet, who were filming a documentary on a year in a probationary fireman, his probationary year. And they were living with the ladder, the fire team, the firehouse, while they made their documentary. So they followed their ladder out to odor of gas call. And they have, I think it's the only footage of the first plane hitting World Trade Center 1 North Tower, the first one struck. And then, the firefighters respond. And then when they're back at their ladder, they're, processing it. And they're going, it was like boom, 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 like a controlled demolition. This is firemen. And a lot of first responders mentioned secondary explosions. None of them tipped over where they were hit, which you might expect if it was not controlled demolition.
Mm-hmm.
Prior to this, there had been over 100 fires in steel frame skyscrapers that didn't fall. And a lot of these fires went hotter, burned longer, and over a wider area.
Yeah. Well, and the other important thing that you just brought up, there was a bunch of people in the basement which is really, really deep. There was a lot of levels to the basement. I mean, to hold a building up that size, you're going way, way underground. But there were guys that were getting their faces completely smashed by flying concrete after they heard and felt an explosion. There were dudes down there that completely got blown back like it was a Hollywood movie off of their feet from the percussion and getting their faces smashed by pieces of the wall flying. I mean, could you imagine how thick a piece of a wall is in a building like that? 6 floors down in a basement? And there were people getting hit in the face by basement wall chunks.
Yeah, and they had to put those the load bearing columns on the bedrock.
That's right.
They went down to bedrock.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at the visual evidence, and mind you, the steel has remained in a molten state for September, October, November, December, 3 months. 3 months, molten steel. It melted the bedrock visually. If you look at the bedrock, it looks like it had turned into hot magma.
There's photos. There's a lot of photos of really weird, deformed rock.
Very flowing,
sweepy, yeah, riverish, yeah. And that's not normal for that area.
Yeah.
Rock had been there since dinosaurs were there.
Yeah, in Hawaii, we have 2 types of lava. Which are kind of like fist size and larger rocks. Mm-hmm. Lapa hoi hoi, which is ropey.
Okay.
And you saw that kind of ropey aspect.
Yeah.
Rounded, ropey, swirling to the bedrock.
Flowing. Yeah, that's right.
And if these fires are hot enough to burn steel, even though, or at least melt steel, sometimes they just say it didn't melt it, it just weakened it. If it was hot enough to do that, then why do we have so many pictures of people waving for help at the windows? This is just the list of anomalies. We haven't even we're not even really into the details yet.
Sure.
And back to the slide again. The slant cuts, 5 sliced steel. There's photographic evidence of some of the columns that they were unwise enough to retain.
Yeah.
Having a 45-degree angle slant cuts. Perfectly diagonal slant cuts. Just dip a little nanothermite on there, away she goes.
Yeah.
Then there was the spire. The spire was a 40-story inner column that remained standing for a few seconds after one of them fell. You don't see it in every video, but you see it in some. And it's just standing there for a while, and then it too. 40 stories, steel column. %, of the policemen, firemen, and other first responders developed respiratory problems.
Mm-hmm.
Hundreds developed cancer. EPA Director Christine Todd Whitman said that the air was safe. It was not. But if it was a gravity fall, why was there so much dust?
Yeah.
Enough dust to give 75% of the first responders respiratory problems and hundreds of cancer cases.
And for miles and miles.
Yeah. So we've got 200,000 tons of structural steel, 400,000 cubic yards of concrete, all human remains, office furnishings, everything turned into a fine dust. I mean, just a few months ago, they found human remains on the roof of a nearby skyscraper that were all less than a centimeter in size. If it's a gravity fall, they'd be mushed with the rest of the mass of the building. They wouldn't be shot onto the roof of nearby skyscrapers as fragments less than a centimeter in diameter.
Yeah.
I'm doing my George Galway.
Yeah.
This is the second mother of all talk shows with your host, George Galway Boyce Brown. I love that man and I love his show. Big ups to George. So, all of that shit turned to dust. You know what didn't? The passport of
Passports. Yeah.
So all this shit turns to dust, and then one of the passports of the alleged hijackers doesn't. A guy just gives it to the detective and runs away. Huh.
Oh, God bless America.
Land that I love. That's a magical passport.
Yeah.
So now we can move on to the 5 dancing Israelis.
Mm-hmm.
You heard about them?
I'm sure it'll come to me.
You're about to. Okay. We had Zim Shipping and Zim Moving.
That's right.
We've got another moving company. Urban Moving Systems.
Mm-hmm.
There were 5 dancing Israelis on the top of a parking garage looking at 9/11 from New Jersey, looking at Ground Zero from New Jersey, high-fiving each other, dancing. And someone called the cops and said, "What?
Yeah, what the hell's going on here?" Yeah, that's right.
Why the fuck you celebrating you?"
Yeah. Uh-huh.
So they got arrested, and they have names.
Yeah.
Let's name them.
Mm-hmm.
Sivan Kurtzberg, Paul Kurtzberg, Oded Elner, Yaron Shemuel, Omar Marmari. Those were the 5 dancing Israelis. Ahead of the curve comes with receipts, Mark.
Because they just got rich.
And what did they tell the policeman? Quote, "We are Israeli. We are not your problem. Your problems are our problems. The Palestinians are the problem."
Mm-hmm.
This is from the police report.
Yeah.
2 of those 5 are confirmed Mossad.
Right.
Urban Moving Systems was a suspected Mossad front. Its owner, Dominique Otto Suter, an Israeli citizen, was questioned on September 12th. Guess where he fled to 2 days later?
Israel.
One and the same.
Yeah. Palestine.
They were interviewed on Israeli television, these 5 young men.
Yeah.
Who had about 3,500 in cash in a sock, which was recorded by the police officers. On the Israeli television program, they said that they were there to document it. How would they have the foreknowledge?
Prior knowledge, yeah.
Unless they knew it was going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
A former employee of Urban Moving Systems contacted the Newark division of the FBI, because he quit because there was just too much rabid anti-Americanism in that company. And he told Newark FBI that an Israeli employee of Urban Moving Systems had told him, quote, this is in 2001, quote, give us 20 years and we will take over your media and destroy your country. They've just about done it.
Yeah.
Allegedly.
Right.
Okay. Now we get to a one Mr. Muhammad Atta. Okay, these guys are all conservative Muslim fundamentalists, right?
Yeah. Right.
Well, apparently not all of them. Because Atta and his buddies in Hollywood, Florida, were seen. They're drinking at titty bars. They're dating strippers. They're doing coke. They're renting porno in their motels. And it bears noting that many of the alleged hijackers were CIA recruits, had studied at military schools, had worked at military bases, like Muhammad Atta, who attended officer school at Maxwell Gunter U.S. Air Force Base in Montgomery, Alabama in 1998. So I think that's part of how they got either the bodies or the identity theft victims, is that they had already, some of these people, particularly maybe the actual bodies, had entered the formal military system and were just that made them easier to surveil by the spy ring that was tracking all of them. Now let's start to dip into the involvement of Pakistan's Inter-Services Intelligence, ISI. Its head at the time, General Mahmoud Ahmed, wired $100,000, on the orders of General Ahmed, Omar Sheikh with Pakistan ISI wired Muhammad Atta $100,000 in the days before 9/11. Ahmed, head of Pakistani intelligence, immediately prior to 9/11, met with the White House, the Pentagon, the National Security Council, and then head of the CIA, George Tenet, and Mark Grossman, one of those dual citizens, who was then Undersecretary of Political Affairs at State. So let's delve a little deeper into identity theft.
Yeah.
We could say roughly half were bodies that maybe didn't know what was about to happen to them, and half were identity theft. Let's look at these. Let's look at these bad boys. Bad boys, bad boys. Hijackers. Couple anomalies here, Mark. None of them were on the original flight manifests.
That's right.
None of them were recorded by airport security cams.
Mm-hmm.
There's one that they show now and then, but that was from Portland, Maine, not from any of the originating airports.
That's right.
No security footage from any of the originating airports of these guys.
Nope.
Even the FBI said that they were very uncertain about some of them. But Philip Zelikow, executive director of the 9/11 Commission, allegedly helped ensure that the commission included them all en bloc anyway. Let's go through some that we know for certain were victims of identity theft.
Absolutely.
One of the alleged pilots, Walid al-Sher, he had a press conference in Casablanca saying, Hello, still alive. Abdul Aziz Al Omari, another alleged hijacker, had lost his passport in Denver. Ready-made identity theft kit. And there was another Abdul Aziz Al Omari who was a pilot for Saudi Arabian Airlines. Khalid Al Midar may also be alive.
Mhm.
Even FBI Director Robert Mueller said that the identities of several were in doubt. And there's links at stonefruit.substack.com that there's stories that 4, 7, 8, 9, 10, up to 10 may have been victims of identity theft. 10 of the 19.
Mhm.
And it appears that a few were already dead. So now we can get to the nitty-gritty. The mechanics of the alleged flight hijackings. This is indeed where the rubber begins to meet the road. Okay, here's the official conspiracy theory. American Airlines 11 and United Airlines 175 both leave Boston Logan, headed for the Twin Towers. United Airlines 93 leaves Newark. That's the one that allegedly lets roll and the passengers revolt and it crashes in Shanksville. American Airlines 77, that's the one that allegedly hit the Pentagon. This is the official conspiracy theory. And there's the time when they left, when the two hit and when they all allegedly hit their target. Well, I propose a different hypothesis, Mark. At stonefruits.substack.com, this is an animated GIF. And it shows that the two flights that originated out of Boston, they all wiggled and waggled, but then they overlapped at exactly the same time, right over Stewart Air National Guard Base, 30 miles north of Manhattan.
Mm-hmm.
Stewart Air Base is where the Iran hostages were repatriated to the United States on the day of Reagan's inauguration. So a little before we get to Stewart, and I think the fundamental role it's played, let's talk a little bit about the so-called phone calls from some of the passengers and flight staff.
Yeah, because it's so easy to make phone calls on an airplane.
The technology didn't exist in 2001.
No.
So it probably had to happen when they were grounded, possibly in Air Force Base. And the nature of the calls was peculiar. They were oddly calm, seemingly scripted. There's no background noise consistent with a cruising jet. Some were really long.
Yeah.
And one, CC Lyles, and there's a YouTube of this, links at Substack. She says her little script, and then really quietly, sotto voce, she says, "It's a frame. It's a frame." No plane debris at Shanksville. No plane debris at the Pentagon. We'll get into more detail at that later.
Yeah.
Okay, Dub Zakheim Systems Data International. I think I got that right. System Planning Corporation. They have the flight termination system that can control commercial aviation's autopilot. Let us bear in mind that the first flight of Global Hawk, a remotely piloted or autonomous aircraft, first flight was made February 28th, 1998. Global Hawk is the one in the upper left.
Yep.
So if they have the technology for a long distance drone with Global Hawk, they have the technology, and that's obviously remotely controlled. Systems Planning Corporation can take over commercial aviation. So these facts make plausible the scenario that the planes were taken over remotely, landed somewhere, just like Operation Northwoods.
Yep.
Just as we read. Which base? How about Stewart at Newburgh, New York, 30 miles north of Manhattan?
Mm-hmm.
Now, Stewart Air Force, it's Air National Guard, so it doesn't even get the traffic a military base would get.
That's right.
The base has no family or transient military housing. What personnel is there are lodged in nearby motels.
Right. So
there's nobody there. It doesn't even have the traffic of a military base. It's already deep state involved from the October surprise and the repatriation of the Iranian hostages on the inauguration day of Reagan. Huh. How about that?
That's a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's get into what might have happened on the ground there. There was a passenger who was allegedly killed. Unusual character, unusual set of circumstances. Israeli-American Daniel Lewin.
Mm-hmm.
FAA wrote a memo saying that the hostages, saying that a bullet had been fired and that one of the hostages had killed someone. Now, Daniel Levin was the founder of pioneering internet backbone company Akamai, which is actually Hawaiian for smart.
Mm.
And he was also a member of the Israeli army's Sarayet Markal, which is the general staff's own personal special operations force. Special ops force that answers directly to the Israeli military general staff.
Wow.
So this guy, Daniel Lewin, is one of these types of guys that's trained to be able to kill you with a credit card or one finger, right?
Sure, yeah.
So he might have been the actual muscle to kill enough people, to that one shot fired that's acknowledged by the FAA, which maybe it wasn't one of the alleged hijackers killing Daniel Levin. It was Daniel Levin killing one of the alleged hijackers, perhaps.
Sure. Yeah.
Perhaps. Enough events to create fear and compliance. Maybe to, let's go a little further into this weird incident on the ground. Another hijacker allegedly cut the throat of another business class passenger.
Right.
Maybe this was Mr. Levin again. I don't know. They have seat numbers. AA Flight Services are talking. FAA is citing it down to the seat number level. Very peculiar.
Yeah.
They probably needed to be grounded to make the calls. There's one bullet fired and one throat slit. Maybe that was enough to urge compliance among the terrified passengers to board 2 new planes. Because the eyewitnesses at Ground Zero said that the planes that hit the Twin Towers were smaller than passenger jumbo jets. And video and photographic evidence shows a flash right before these planes enter the World Trade Center.
Yeah.
And that flash might have been a missile just to clear the way in the building, because these aluminum planes are fragile and they couldn't have gotten in there unless they had had the way cleared by a missile.
Yeah.
So we mentioned earlier, Zackheim's comptroller of the Pentagon during 9/11, Dov Zackheim's company, Systems Planning Corporation, was contracted to send at least 32 of the one in the upper right, the KC-767, the fuel tanker, a modified 767, to MacDill Air Force Base in Florida as part of a tanker lease agreement. So what struck North Tower might have been a KC-767. Video and then Naudet brothers were the only ones to get that on film. Of course, every camera in New York was on the Twin Towers by the time the second one hit.
That's right.
So there's video and photographic evidence of the one hitting World Trade Center 2, the South Tower, and it had a kind of a pod underneath it. Commercial civil aviation doesn't have a pod.
Yeah.
But look at that Northrop Grumman E-10 in the bottom left. It does
Yep.
have a pod.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe that was what hit the second one. The question immediately emerges: what happened to the passengers? What happened to the planes?
Yeah.
I don't know. Here I speculate. But what I think might be reasonable was perhaps Daniel Lewin killed 2 of the half of the alleged 19 hijackers that were human bodies, killed 2 of them, enough to stoke fear in everybody and compliance. They were loaded into one or both of the replacement planes, and then it would have been a relatively routine flight to have the repainted tail numbers of the civil aircraft at Stewart Air National Guard Base in Newburgh, New York, to have them fly off to one of the boneyards in Southern California or Arizona.
Yep.
The aircraft graveyards.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly as it was described in the Operation Northwoods.
Wow.
So that memo turned into a instruction manual.
Yeah.
Now let's get into some of the flights in more particular. American Airlines 77 supposedly hit the Pentagon. If they're terrorists and they just want to do damage, they could have just nosedived the mother trucker right into the Pentagon.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, they did this incredibly elaborate 300-degree corkscrew dive from 7,000 feet to 5 feet above the ground at 500 miles an hour with no damage to the lawn. A maneuver that would challenge an experienced fighter pilot in a high-performance fighter jet.
There was literally no damage to the lawn.
When the instructor of the hijacker allegedly at the controls was described by his flight instructor as unable to solo a Cessna.
Yeah.
No damage to the lawn, no damage to the upper floors. You've got like a 50-foot high tail fin, would have caused damage to the upper floors.
Yeah.
No wings.
No engines.
No
Rolls-Royce,
engine.
when you look at the Rolls-Royce specs of what those engines were made out of, it's
They're
not
gigantic.
possible. It's not possible for them to vaporize and disappear. It's
Those
not.
aren't aluminum. Those are steel.
Yeah. It's just
There's
not possible.
yeah, but oh God, the American public are such these damn conspiracy theorists. I mean, look, there's fragments. God, what does the American public want? We've got all these fragments here. I mean, okay, yeah, there's no wings, there's no engines, but there's fragments. Look, there's another one.
Yeah.
Mark, the photographic evidence of the fragments just keep coming and coming. Hang on. Here's another one.
Yeah.
And here's another one. Oh, no, wait. There are no other photos of evidence of fragments of the plane that allegedly hit the Pentagon.
Mm-hmm.
These pictures came from the FBI website.
Yep.
If a plane had hit the Pentagon and they wanted to allay the public's concern that it was actually a plane, there would have been wreckage in front of the Pentagon, but then the FBI would have had tons of photographic evidence of it. This is all that's on the FBI website. Those three. And the FBI commandeered all of the security cam footage of every business nearby.
Mm-hmm. Even across our freeway. Even the traffic cams.
Everything. Pentagon. Most video surveilled building on planet Earth.
Yep.
No photographs released from it.
Almost as bad as a casino in Macau.
Nothing. Except they did release one. A security camera for a Pentagon parking lot.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Let's follow the history of just this one that was released. When I wrote this when I wrote this article in the July of this year, okay, go back a few years. Initially, you see something streaking across the lawn, literally kicking up dust. Then you see an explosion. Next time I looked at that film on YouTube, it was just the explosion. They had dropped the frames. That photo is now unavailable on YouTube. Even the one that they released is now no longer available.
They decided it was a bad idea.
Just the one.
Yeah.
And go to Substack because there are a few like helicopter footage and you just see full on missile.
Mm-hmm.
Clear as day.
Yeah.
And it's on Reddit, and Reddit participates in big tech censorship.
Yeah.
They got rid of Chapo Trap House's subreddit. You know, a popular leftist podcast. Even that was too much for the narrative control of Reddit.
Mm-hmm.
People focus on Facebook and Twitter and Google. Reddit plays too.
Yeah.
They got rid of Chapo Trap House, but they still had one of the missile videos, and there's another missile video. They're both at my Substack. But what did the fella from CNN say the day of?
From
From
my
my
close-up
close,
inspection, yeah, right.
proceed.
There's no evidence of a plane having crashed anywhere near the Pentagon. The only site is the actual side of the building that's crashed in. The only pieces left that you can see are small enough that you could pick up in your hand. There are no tail sections, wing sections, a fuselage of any kind, nothing like that anywhere around, which would that the entire plane crashed into the side of the Pentagon.
Goddamn conspiracy theorist.
Yeah.
There's a Richard Pryor has a joke where his wife catches him in mid oof with some paramour,
Sure.
and Pryor defends himself. Who you gonna believe, me or your lying eyes?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's the extent of the photographic wreckage, photographic record of the wreckage. Now let's take a look at another photo from the cleanup. Oh,
Oh, that's the third layer of the 5.
third ring of the 5. Something was strong
Wow.
enough to get through 3 sections of reinforced pentagon and leave in a circle
A perfect circle.
that you can tell by the no parking sign is maybe 12, 13, 14 feet high.
Yeah.
That is not consistent with the exit pattern of a plane.
No. Especially in a no parking zone.
Yeah,
Come on, guys.
no parking on the dance floor. So if it wasn't a 747, what could it have been?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I don't know. Maybe a cruise missile designed to look like an American Airlines plane?
Looking about that size.
Huh. What do you know? I'll be doggoned.
Mm-hmm.
Ain't that something, Mark?
Yeah.
So now we can get to the Pennsylvania one.
Sure.
Let's roll. Yeah. Okay, it crashed near Shanksville, small town in Pennsylvania. A one Mr. Ernie Stull, mayor of Shanksville, said, quote, "There was no plane. My sister and a good friend of mine were the first ones there. They were standing on a street corner in Shanksville talking. Their car was nearby, so they were the first here. And the fire department came. Local fire department. Everyone was puzzled because the call had been that a plane had crashed, but there was no plane." End quote. Eyewitness, mayor of the town, also with his local fire department. Numerous witnesses said that a mystery plane arrived shortly after the alleged crash
After. Yeah.
to check out what happened. And some mentioned a second plane weaving erratically just above the treetops. Witnesses did not consider it a military plane. Back to Stewart Air National Guard Base. Phoenix Air, which I believe we mentioned in 911 motive, has been identified by plane spotters as participating in the hijacking and torture program, or as they like to call it with sanitized language, extraordinary rendition and enhanced interrogation program.
Yeah.
in Shannon Airport in Ireland. This Phoenix Air. We'll get to the connection of Phoenix Air and Hollywood, Florida, and Otta's flight school soon enough. But if eyewitnesses over Pennsylvania, around Pennsylvania, say that it wasn't a military plane, Phoenix has, civilian private jet type planes. We'll get to that. Well, in fact, I think we did get to that in motive. So I'll freestyle a bit on Phoenix Air. Phoenix Air was owned by a guy who had been career military. Then he quit for a couple years and trained Saudis, and then seems to have been entered into the deep state, and he founded Phoenix Air at that time. Phoenix Air gave, I believe it was about a dozen of these kind of smaller civilian business jet type of jets, which are the kind that they use for the torture and kidnapping program.
Absolutely.
And they gave them to Huffman Aviation in Hollywood, Florida. And his bad boys learned to fly.
Mm-hmm.
And Huffman Aviation, their principals are engaged with drug running and Ponzi schemes and stock pump and dumps. And once you're a made man for the deep state, you can get away with a lot of criminality. It's just kind of that's your payoff for providing deep state services.
Yep. So
Phoenix Air could have been operating out of Newburgh well beneath the radar. And Phoenix Aviation, they specialize in electronic warfare, counter electronic aviation. This is from their website. Electronic warfare, counter electronic warfare, counter electronic warfare.
Yeah, right.
So
create the problem, provide the solution.
Yeah, they can provide, and I think they even use the word bespoke, like a tailor making a personal suit. Providing bespoke aviation solutions.
Yeah.
That's Phoenix. And Phoenix gave a bunch of planes to Huffman Aviation, which they flew Senator Robert Menendez around for campaigning for free, who's now under investigation with his gold bars and cash. So it wasn't Atta and his boys would just, we just found a random air training school.
Sure.
They were planted in a deep state air training school.
Yeah.
That had deep connections with Phoenix Air that could have provided a lot of assistance, possibly operating out of Stewart Air National Guard Base, 30 miles north of New York City. We're winding up. We're in the home stretch here, Brother Mark. Let's examine how fragile these bad boys are. Okay, they had the power to dash through 200,000 tons of structural steel. Upper left, bird strike.
Yeah.
Upper right, hail strike.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. The nose cones are often fiberglass. Yeah, it's so weak. Well, the planes are aluminum. Look what the aluminum did. Look what a street lamp did to a wing, taxiing at 5 miles an hour.
Yeah.
Bottom right. That is a fragile plane. If it sustains that type of damage just from running into a lamppost.
That's right.
So as we conclude, 911 means we can look again at narrative management. It was a combination of the kind of elite media appearances by people like Paul Bremer and a lot of fake vox pop, man on the street type of interviews.
Yeah.
And some of them were fucking rich. Like my favorite one was number 1, narrative management. okay, there's this guy, white guy, middle age, very composed. Everyone at Ground Zero was flipping out, right?
Freaking out.
Freaking out. This guy's really composed.
Uh-huh.
He's wearing a Harley Davidson t-shirt, so he's a man of the people.
Yeah.
But it was really new. The shirt, he didn't look comfortable in it at all. It just looked like a prop.
Yeah.
It didn't look appropriate on him at all. And I can even imitate his voice about how he said the words that are quoted in one. And it obviously fell because of the structural damage due to fire. Yeah,
just your everyday biker in Manhattan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's not 200 pounds. He doesn't have a huge beard. He's not gutted.
Right.
He doesn't look like someone.
He's like really clean shaven.
Yeah. He's not someone that would scare the shit out of you in an alley at night. He looks like a desk jockey. I think he had like khakis on too or something.
Well, there was another funny one right after him too, or right before, in what today in 2023 would be called a Karen or a wine mom.
Right.
So there's this slightly portly, middle-aged woman, Caucasian, and just like a typical what nowadays would be considered like a soccer mom in any big city suburb. And she's just like, scorch them all. Like, if they're the one that did this, turn the desert into glass. Burn the sand and words. Like, and it's just like, whoa, there is no way you have that much political wherewithal to say something like that.
Right away.
And why is there a random soccer mom in a frumpy t-shirt in Manhattan? Like, what were you even doing there, lady? Like,
right. We've got a desk jockey turned yuppie biker.
Right.
We've got a Karen wine mom, soccer mom.
Yeah.
Pretending to be people of the people.
Yeah.
So some people like Brimmer in media saying right away, oh, it was Al-Qaeda. Oh, and possibly Iran and Iraq. Everyone, Israel wants out of the competition for regional power.
Mm-hmm.
Consistent with the clean break security brief drafted by Richard Perle in 1996. And the aspirations of all these dual nationals in the neoconservative movement.
That's right.
And let's look at some of the tropes that emerged from the elite management and the fake people of the people management.
Mm-hmm.
Immediately, it's like Osama bin Laden.
Yeah.
Immediately, it's a new Pearl Harbor, which, as people that know 9/11, that comes right out of the Project for a New American Century, rebuilding America's defenses, saying that we need to have a revolution in military affairs to integrate fifth generation warfare and information technology and digital technology and ever enhancing computer power. But absent a new Pearl Harbor, these changes will be long. And then the evening of 9/11, W. writes in his diary, we've had a new Pearl Harbor. Another trope was immediate savage revenge, like your Karen described. Savage revenge. And immediately presaging the Patriot Act, we need to abandon civil liberties. And to protect ourselves, we're going to have to limit our freedoms.
That's right.
Yep. And the American mainland has never been attacked before to underlie, well, often it was just America has never been attacked before. But then they remembered, oh, yeah, Pearl Harbor, yeah, we occupied the kingdom of Hawaii. So
yeah,
in some way that was America. even though we have our doubts here in Hawaii. But yeah, it went from America's never been attacked before to the American mainland has never been attacked before.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to destroy terrorism from our fortress of freedom.
Freedom fries.
We got to have our freedom fries, Mark. Don't you love these freedom fries?
With extra mayonnaise.
Because I'm not fat enough. So MIHOP or LIHOP, those are acronyms, and they mean made it happen on purpose or let it happen on purpose.
Yep.
That usually assumes that the official conspiracy theory of 19 Muslim fundamentalist terrorists hijacked the planes and did what they did with those 4 targets.
Which is ridiculous.
Which is absolutely absurd. So MIHOP, because made it happen on purpose means that there's government complicity, deep state complicity. Let it happen on purpose. They knew it was going to happen. They let it happen. Like some people are saying that the Hamas attack, they might have let it happen on purpose, but I don't believe that. But
sure.
But in the context of 9/11, they might have known that it was going to happen and let it happen. That's if you believe the official conspiracy theory. I do not believe the official conspiracy theory.
Me either.
So if not that, then what?
Yeah.
What is the it? Perhaps the it is that American Zionist and Saudi deep states made a televisual spectacle of trauma-based mind control designed to induce compliance with a very modern iteration of a very ancient system of government.
Sure.
Totalitarianism.
Yeah.
And mind control was actually done by, attempted to have been done by, they had decades-long programs in the CIA, MK Ultra, MK Naomi, Project Artichoke, and they used a lot of LSD for it too, but they used a lot of trauma. And trauma can facilitate the creation of mind control, the hypnotic feature. And we've referred briefly to satanic ritual abuse, child trafficking, pedophilia. Often that includes trauma, physical abuse, as well as sexual abuse.
Mm-hmm.
So the notion of trauma is essential to mind control because, as we noted in 911 motive, that if they really wanted to do damage, they could have just run into Indian Point nuclear power plant and rendered the Northeast uninhabitable for the rest of human existence. But that would not have been the televisual spectacle.
Yeah.
So what Brother Orwell said, how he defined totalitarianism is, this is the it. Made it happen on purpose, let it happen on purpose. What is it? Trauma-based mind control to make us submit to totalitarianism, defined by Orwell as a society living by and for continuous warfare, which the ruling caste have ceased to have any function but succeed in clinging to power through force and fraud.
Mm-hmm.
If that's the it, then they most definitely made that happen on purpose.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Now, it goes without saying, all of this is for entertainment value only, and these are all allegations, and please don't kill me. Please don't deplatform me. But this has been our wild excursion with my brother, Mark French.
To be continued.
Ahead of the curve at YouTube, BitChute, Rumble, Odyssey, Locals, and stonefruit.substack.com. And we will be providing the third installment of Opportunity Fort With. Transmitting from within 10 miles of the center of the largest unified military command in the world, the Indo-Pacific Command. This is Boyce Brown signing off, saying until next time, 5 viewers.